Okay, we're good.
Yeah, there we go.
Sorry, iPhone headphones suck.
Is it echoing or is it good? I can't tell.
It's echoing for me.
And after the gig, I was going to go to the party. Guys, my goodness.
What should we do?
Ellie?
Oh my good. Okay, I think I fixed it. It's not echoing. All good.
Okay, awesome.
I'm so sorry. Apologize for that.
That's no big deal.
It's all right. It killed 10 minutes. It's the most important thing at this stage of a 24-hour.
Yeah, exactly. Lexi, you want to kick this off?
Yeah. Have we launched? Are we live?
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Okay.
We're live.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to us. I'm really excited to be here today. I'm with one of my very favorite PR SEOs in the whole world, Elli Bishop, and we're going to be answering a bunch of questions that have been tweeted at us and emailed to us, and the questions that we generally get asked by our teams, clients, and we ask each other. Now, the coolest part about Elli is that she does stuff kind of different to how I do things now and again. And I think that's really important because one of the greatest challenges with PR SEO, from my experience, is you get a question and you Google it, right? Because that's what any sensible person does. And unlike Googling how to boil an egg and getting an instant answer, it can be really difficult to get the answers to PR SEO questions. And that's because there isn't a standard answer for anything. So today you're going to get a couple of viewpoints on a whole bunch of questions. If you've got any more thoughts or points of view, please tweet them at us or email me. My email is in my Twitter bio, and I'll be happy to respond and talk to you about it later, as will Elli. So,
Great. Thanks, Lexi.
Elli, would you like to tell everyone a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. Yeah, so my name's Elli Bishop, and I am the Director of Outreach and Digital PR at ClearLink. We're headquartered out of Utah. Utah is a lot better than people think it is. And so I lead a team of 20 plus outreach specialists who are dedicated to a wide variety of different brand partners. And just a tiny bit about ClearLink. We basically provide our clients with everything from digital marketing all the way through to customer service. So a little bit of every single stage of the funnel. I work with about 20 to 25 outreach specialists and grew that team from the ground up. So really excited to be here.
Cool.
And I thought I'd give you a bit of an idea of where I came from. I got into marketing largely due to postgraduate poverty. I was living in a place called Brighton, and the only jobs were really in the music industry, working in nightclubs. So I started off handing out flyers, then designing the flyers, then doing the marketing strategies. Over time, I discovered online marketing and PR mainly as a way to not hand out flyers. And that's kind of how I initially learned it. I did a lot of training thereafter, and I've worked in PR agencies like Dynamo PR, which I built with the rest of the team from 4 of us up to around 30. And then I worked at Distilled as well and built their PR department there. I've since worked in-house, which taught me a whole load about being a client and like all those pain points. And now I run my own agency, which does PR SEO and training and support for other agencies. So I've kind of sat in many different shoes, and I know that if you're an SEO, you've got very different challenges to being a PR. So we'll try and answer both sides. So I thought we would start by talking about industry best practices. Now, one of the questions we've been asked a lot is, what do you feel is the biggest mistake being made in digital PR currently? Elli, do you want to kick off with an answer to that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, personally, I think the biggest issue right now is just measurement, like measuring the success of digital PR and proving the value of it to, either a client or even the people above you, right? So I think that they're looking at ad value a lot of times in traditional PR, and that's great, and you can get some great insight from traditional PR measurement, but they're really not tracking or putting a KPI on outreach and link building. So something I've done with my team is look at link vendors all across the country or all across the world and create sort of like a estimated market value for your links based on what other link vendors are selling links for, and really give whoever you're trying to convince that PR is actually having an impact on your business, convince them how much or tell them how much you would have had to spend on links that you earned if you were to pay for them. And a lot of times it's that numeric value that helps your team understand how valuable a link is. Another thing I obviously always do is tie link building to organic traffic increases. And we've also really gotten good at getting our links clicked and driving referral traffic from link building, which is always something a client likes to see, that we didn't traditionally set out doing link building for. I mean, you weren't trying to get clicks to your site, and now we're at a place where we can actually make links useful, which is a crazy thing, and that's really cool. So I think the biggest mistake is just not accurately explaining the value of link building and outreach and the impact it can have on your site.
It's all incredibly relevant points, and you talk a lot about the different things you can measure. I've become very aware that there's different grades of people looking at your reports. Now, my point of contact might be happy, but if their boss isn't happy, they're going to be mean to my point of contact. And what generally happens is they're mean to you. It's just like a little domino effect. And something I started doing when I was working at an SEO agency was no one would let me put PR metrics or PR sort of explanations to the brand value of some of my coverage onto the reports. So the night before the reports auto-sent, I would log into the system and put PR explanations and brand value onto the reports, and they would auto-send and no one would know. I had a couple of upset account managers when they found out, but what was interesting is we got a lot of calls saying we'd like more of that. And that got me into the idea of maybe I should just report on everything to everyone. And this is something I've been really passionate about. I have a couple of friends who have built me some really cool XML sheets that track pretty much everything from old school days, Google Plus stuff, but mainly now the traffic, the value of the link, the domain authority, how many clicks it gets, what we think the brand value is, how many times it's been referenced by other people. And what I tend to do is just order the report in sections. So my point of contact's key information is top, but the other information goes further and further down. And when I'm structuring the reporting, my aim is for my client to be able to cut and paste and forward that to someone else and get some pats on the back. The cut and paste factor is really important because a lot of SEO people will understand domain authority, but there are a lot of people in PR or even really senior marketing execs who don't fully understand domain authority. So I always make sure there's a little explanation of it. It's 2 sentences. It's super helpful to do. And it's meant that now I can go back. If a client says, I want traffic, I can go back and find the publications that I know drive traffic versus the ones that are more likely to give us links. And so I can model a strategy based on what I know the dominant outputs are. So it means that your reporting actually feels you getting better, because reporting can often just feel like a really big pain in the ass. You're like, I've done a great job. The business is moving forward. I don't want to spend 3 hours on this. I want to spend 3 hours doing something cool. But when it's making you smarter and better, that's super helpful. And especially if a client is going through investment, we get a lot of tech firms coming to us who are at different stages of investment, and they'll say, we have to be on TechCrunch, or we have to be on, we have to increase our traffic by X or Y. And now we know how to do that. And although it may not always have the most whizzy fandango looking brand names, I know I can increase traffic. The blockchain industry is actually super interesting for this. So I'm not sure if any of you saw this, but there was an article that went out saying that CoinMarketCap is more influential than the Wall Street Journal when it comes to blockchain. There's no client that's going to go streaking through the office being like, I was on CoinMarketCap, but they might do it for Wall Street Journal. But if they're looking to get a round of funding, what they really want to show is that their traffic is doing that. So you might reprioritize where you're targeting based on that.
Yeah, and another thing I've done instead of showing them domain authority, because even when I've explained domain authority to some clients, it's like they gloss over and it still doesn't feel important to them. So I've shown that I use like SimilarWeb to just pull like average monthly visits, and even that number can be their domain authority equivalent. You just have to find something that aligns with their KPIs and anchor yours to theirs.
Exactly. I think that's the key thing, is knowing that a standardized reporting, the only thing that should be standardized is maybe the logo at the top of your page, and everything else should be fairly unique. Shall we move on, Ellie? I know one of the questions I get asked all the time is, how do you ask a journalist for links? Do you want to give me your views on that, and then I'll chip in after?
Yeah. Well, I've actually never just straight up asked a journalist for a link. I tried to earn a link from a journalist, but I would never say, hey, you've got this article from a month ago and I want you to link something in it, obviously, because they usually don't have control over something that's already published. But what I'll do for future posts is, I would find a way to piggyback on something that they've been talking about a lot in their past calls, find a way to tie it to the product, service, or content that I'm trying to speak to, and reach out to them on Twitter, start building a relationship with them. Don't ask for anything right away. You should have been doing this, a year or two ago. Start working on building that relationship, and then get to the point where you can actually say, hey, I'd love to pitch a piece of content to you, or I'd love to share something that I know your readers would like, because one, it's trending in the news right now. You haven't covered it before, but this is a topic that you always cover. And so you're just trying to convince them that it'll be great for them, great for their readers, and it will help them write a really good story. And then, of course, you want to make the media's job easier. So you want to give them literally everything they need to write this story, from graphics to, even an intro paragraph for them. Like anything you can do to make a journalist's job easier, basically write the story for them. They can rephrase it in their own words, but the more you can do ahead of time to make their job easier, go a long way.
And that is something I'm super behind, is that making it easier. And there's a really good test for this, because I find that often content teams, when they hand over to PR teams, there's this whole barrel of friction. It's like passing this bomb around. And one of the things I've got the content teams to do is, if they say ill fit on The Guardian, I'll say to them, what section? How long are the articles on average in that section? It takes less than a minute to work that out. And then I say to them, okay, so go write me an article that looks like it could have been on The Guardian in that section that naturally references the content. And if they can do that, then I'm like, cool, give it to the PR team. We're ready to go. But that exercise itself often reveals that, our content gives them a little bit of an intro and a couple of data points, but it's actually not meaty enough to write 800 words or 600 words with. And that tells you that, okay, now the PR team must go find another current story to add into it, or some more data, or the content team needs to do it, or you need to build your content out. But if you go through that exercise, it makes everything so much smoother. And when it comes to asking for links, I tend to ask for a reference. Can you reference the source? And there are so many different things someone can reference. Sometimes my clients, some of them have really hardcore CRMs that don't allow us to get stuff up on the system easily or quickly. So if we're doing something fast, that can be challenging. But let's say we're promoting a quote from a CEO. We'll ask the journalist if they can reference the CEO's bio on the webpage, on the website. There are so many different places that a journalist could reference that enhances the value of that article and substantiates why somebody's being quoted or why this company's data is relevant. So I think it's not so much about asking for a link, but as much as working out where a reference point would be of value to them and their audience. And I really like
and in the email, I have one tip for that. In the email, we've started using citation request in all caps, and then we'll say your article on 127 or whatever date it was. Citation request works like a charm in all linking where we're trying to get them to either link a person's name or link the brand. Works like a charm.
And it really works with images too. So I've had a couple of travel sites, and I was scratching my head with how do we get deep links to this travel site where we can put no content on the pages. And then I was like, hang on, the only thing on these pages is images. And I'd spent like hours like beating my head against the wall over this. And I was like, oh, that's the answer. I will give the images to media and ask for image references. So yeah, I'm super behind the citation request. Or like I try and be quite gentle. Maybe I'm a bit too much of a wuss with it, but I always say, if it's at all possible, it would be great if you could reference these sources. So it depends how hardcore you want to go with it. I know a lot of PRs that are super strict with it and say, this is our citation request, and you better do it kind of thing, and do quite well. I'm just a little bit too pink and fluffy for that approach. But I'm kind of interested to try it. So there might be a few journalists getting some more hardcore emails from me just so that I can split test it.
The subject line is the most aggressive bit. And then you go into the email and you're like, oh my gosh, I noticed you, be really nice and fluffy and don't scare them. But I think just the citation request in the subject line, nothing else is going to get you to open an email but citation request.
Exactly.
And then that actually kind of segues nicely into something that's relevant to how do you ask for links. I've actually basically made half of my team journalists. So they've gone out and become subject matter experts in kind of general realms like technology or entertainment or lifestyle. And in that way, we've kind of steered away from asking journalists for things and creating journalists so they can go out and create awesome content both on our sites and off of our sites, and then naturally be able to create that connection between the content they're creating on site and the content that they're contributing to top tier publications. It's a long game for sure because you have to build someone up with no reputation, but it's actually not as difficult as it sounds. You just, look for people with strong writing skills or a freelance background or English degree. And then you try and teach them the ways of outreach, make them really good at it, and get them out and writing and make them a digital journalist, which is what half of my team does.
So that is a really important point. I think getting someone to understand what it's like to be a journalist, sometimes it's hard to relate, and just trying to write your own article is super helpful. One of my best friends kind of threw her career out the window and decided to become a journalist in her 30s. And it was really cool to watch her kind of navigate it, because all the questions she had are the questions Ellie and I get all the time. How do you pitch to an editor? What time? When do you ring? What should the email look like? The only difference is she's not just trying to get coverage and links and references. She's trying to get paid as well. So it's actually a pretty scary, hard job. But if you want to give your team an interesting hack day to improve their PR SEO skills, get them all to pitch articles to major publications and try get paid for it. It is such an awesome exercise. And I think most teams would benefit from doing that. I learned a lot about journalism when I was in music because I wanted advertising space in a publication in Brighton. And so I agreed to review restaurants in return for free advertising space. And that's when I learned, firstly, that once you've given a restaurant a bad review, you can never go back, which sucks. Even if you kind of like one or two of their dishes, no matter what review you do, you have to show that you have the ability to be objective, so you can't give a completely glowing one. And a lot of articles are like that. Even if someone's covering your product or service, they need to be able to say a pro and a con, because the audience needs to know you have the capacity to do something other than gush. So I found it super, super insightful then, and I still do it now. And I am trying to see how much can you get someone to pay you. just as a point of interest, pitching ghost stories to like, what do you call them in America? We like the rag magazines, like the really like kind of tacky female magazines where they're all gossip. They usually have a 1 or double page spread on ghost stories, real life ghost experiences. And they pay more than national newspapers for those articles. So just pro tip, if you're struggling when you're doing a hack day to get paid journalism articles, you just got to remember a ghostly experience you had. I thought it might be interesting if we could talk a little bit about your team, Ellie, because your team looks super different to mine. So what do you think a highly functional PR SEO team looks like? And how did you get there, and what screw-ups did you make on the way?
Oh, man. So I think a highly functional outreach team, they're wearing a lot of hats. So we're looking for kind of links in 3 primary areas for each of our web properties. We need to get like the volume of links that come from content promotion month over month over month, which involves, creating promotable, newsworthy content, doing outreach on it, and earning a high volume of links. And we want to keep that up. But then we also need links to our products and services, to our core pages, which involves a lot of guest posting and high quality guest posting. So like I said, they usually just go out and write for really good sites and on super relevant topics, make sure it's, trending, newsworthy, like it's good content. So it's not like old school guest posting, and get really high quality links to our product and service pages so we can actually move the needle on our money-making pages while also getting the volume of links necessary to stand out in an industry. And then we have this third area that we need links in, and it's like clickable links, because I think we're moving in a direction where, links are still super relevant, but I think a clicked link is always better than an unclicked link, and Google's smart enough to realize that. So we have a whole area where they need to focus on getting links either within articles or within coverage clicked on. And that's a totally different strategy than trying to sneak links into articles without being detected by an editor, right? So they're trying to juggle all these things. And I think when you get a really good balance of volume of links, authority of links coming from top tier publications, and quality of links in that people are actually clicking on them, that makes for a really successful outreach specialist. And then, of course, if they're all performing at that level, a successful team, because it also supports SEO and it supports content strategy. So it's absolutely crucial for those 3 roles, outreach, SEO, and content strategy, to be collaborating on a weekly basis so that the content strategist knows how to make every single page a little bit more linkable, especially sales pages, because it's really hard to link to super salesy pages with phone numbers and prices all over them. But if you can add stats and facts, or even a map or a graphic that they can cite in an article, it just makes it that much more linkable. And then you also need the SEO to be optimizing the pages and looking for low-hanging fruit and identifying top targets for the outreach specialist to build links to. And these 3 just need to be communicating nonstop. And if they're not, you're missing out on one area of opportunity. So that's what I think it takes to make a really kind of well-oiled machine, is to have those 3 collaborating and just linked at the hip.
And that's an interesting point, because a lot of people do separate content from PR. And I'm super passionate that is a terrible idea. Horrible. I think, so I always make, if someone has a content team and I'm going in to train the PR team, I always make the content team come and I make them pitch some articles, because it completely flips your brain around when you're creating content and having to outreach it. You think about it differently. Just even if you write, it can be helpful if you've got a couple of content ideas to write a pitch email And you're like, do I feel good about sending this? And if the answer is no, there's something wrong with the idea. Or if you can't articulate it in a good way, because sometimes you can feel it's a good idea, but every time you write it down, it just doesn't have the pizzazz. So I find it much better if the outreach and the outreach team and the content team are actually one. And people can have different passions. You know, someone can be really into like working with data and database stories, but I think it also makes for a better job diversity. Like I have a lot of freelancers who support in different specialist areas, and I have a principle that I don't contract anyone for a full day. Nobody is going to get up on the phone and be super excited and passionate for 8 hours. It's just not going to happen. You can drink all the coffee in the world. You can take some hardcore drugs. Not going to help you. But if you can split that up, then you can get a full day's work out of someone. Otherwise, you should just go with a freelancer and contract them for 2 half days, because also outreach involves a lot of follow-up. Without follow-up, I don't let anyone send their first email until they've written 2 follow-up emails, because then they're more likely to send them, because there's a whole load of psychological stuff that goes on with your nerves and things. But if those follow-up emails are already written, you come back in, let's say you did your first bout of outreach on Thursday, you come back into the office on Tuesday, you maybe had like a way too big sandwich at lunch and you're feeling a little bit tired, but your email's are already written. It's so much easier to send your follow-ups then, and so you actually send them. And if you actually send them, you're more likely to get responses. And it's more about hacking yourself than it is hacking journalists.
Yeah, and BuzzStream has sequences now, which allow you to plan your follow-ups. Yesware, of course, has sequences as well, but for big PR teams or big outreach teams, BuzzStream has that feature. And I do the same thing, Lexi, have them write their follow-ups and be prepared to receive rejection.
And that's an interesting one. So I got a rejection, I think it was yesterday evening, and I kind of mulled it over. I went for dinner and I was like, I'm going to ask him why. Because I was so happy that this journalist had actually responded, because he's super busy, but he had said no. I was like, listen, you've already engaged with me. It's over now. Like you're coming, we're going to get to where I need to go eventually. But it took quite a lot of courage to say to him, could you give me some more feedback? And 90% of the time, if you actually do that, it can be something really simple that you can change super quick, because the construct of your business is very different to the construct of the publishing industry. So what's difficult for them to do quickly can be very easy for us. We have a graphic designer sat right next to us. You're like, dude, can you change it to blue, not pink? Right? Whereas they probably have a weird system that they have to go through. So it's always worth asking. And it's really nice for clients to hear as well, because then you can send direct feedback saying, hey, 3 people said that graphic was over-branded. Because it's one thing for you to tell your client information, but I always call it the janitor effect. I always think you could just bring the janitor into a meeting and they could tell your client the same thing you've been telling them for weeks, but because they're hearing it now from a second person, they believe it more. And getting feedback from journalists is a lot like that. A lot of my team, 70% of it are journalists. And I try and pick journalists, one of my stereotypical grumpy journalists, I want hardcore feedback. So they review our content ideas, our media releases, all of our outreach stuff. And if anyone is gentle with the feedback, then I tell them off. That's the only time I ever tell anyone off. I want hardcore, critical, tell me that you're having the worst day of your life and you get this email. What's your thoughts on it? And I find that really super helpful, just in terms of working out, how you should change your strategy. And we often take the quotes from the journalists and show them to clients. And it's great because you can sit down and you're not being the bad guy. You're like, hey, this was the journalist consulting board. This is what they think of the idea that your boss came up with. And that can be super helpful too. I was thinking that it might be worthwhile, because you've mentioned BuzzStream, which I'm a big fan of. I think it might be worthwhile touching on the taboo subject of Newswise. Elli, do you ever use them?
No, I do not. I have opinions on how to use press releases for outreach and link building, but I've never used news. I've used them before, and I don't prefer to use them. I don't really want to pay for things. I want to earn things. So I've optimized press releases, but definitely not used a lot of newswires.
Well, maybe
do you want me to talk about the optimized press release?
Yeah, I was just thinking, let's backtrack. If you want to talk about how you optimize press releases, we can progress onto Newswise, because I've done extensive experiments on these, because it feels like
Great.
it should be something that works well. So yeah, tell me a little bit about how you optimize press releases.
Sure. So my goal is to not really optimize them. It's to make them more unique for the audience and to vary the words you link and the destination URL every single press release you send. So like if we have a big campaign that's a national campaign, but we're targeting news stations on a state-by-state level, every single press release at the bottom when it says about this company, I vary it to meet the needs of those residents in that area. So if you have a geo page, which if you have any sort of geo pages, you always want geo-specific links to those geographic pages. So I'll make sure to include a link to the geo page in that press release. And that's a really, really good way to get a lot of link equity to those lower pages that you're either trying to rank for, but it's really difficult to get links to that many geographic locations. That's where I use a press release, is to get those really hard to earn local links. So if you can create really helpful, useful content that's relevant to the campaign you're promoting, you can link within the About Company section to that geo page. So it's really more of a geo link building strategy for me. And then I'll also use it to maybe link to a page that has a high propensity to send someone to a core page. So just looking in analytics and seeing which pages have the most referral traffic and clicks to other pages on the site. And then I'll send a link to one of those pages. So it's more of a way for me to get really hard to get links.
Yeah, I can see how that helps, especially if you've got a really good geo-targeted list. And I recently had a look at Gorkana's American database. So Gorkana is a press media database, and they're always rocking for British press, and they were good for American financial press. But I didn't think they were that great for other sectors. And I've just had a look at their system, and I was just like, oh, they have got this amazing geo mapping tool for the states. So you can click an area or a zip code and get all the journalists and filter it by subject. So, depending what you're working on, and the data is accurate. It's got everything you need to know to pitch them, and there's a lot of it. They've done something awesome there. So I've been super excited to be playing with that recently. Optimized press releases are probably one of the only things that make me feel aggressive in this world. Someone says to me, optimized press release, and I have to admit I have some biases. If it's a PR that says it, I sometimes don't even bother following it up, because I just think there's no way I know what courses they've done because I've been on them, because I want to know what PRs are learning about SEO, because I'm going in to train them often after they've done a course. And I don't think the training is very good inherently for PRs. So if they say an optimized press release, I take a deep breath, maybe sort of 3 deep breaths, and then I decide if I'm going to change the subject. If it's an SEO, I want to hold their hand and say, all those links you really want that don't serve a purpose to the person reading the press release have to come out. I'm so sorry, because I've been on both sides and done both things. So it's pot calling the kettle black here, but PRs will often put more relevant links in, right? And then there's some really old school SEO stuff that still gets taught in PR, current day PR courses that they do, that makes it's just horrible. It's just there's no way of explaining how awful it is. But on the SEO side, there's been a lot of conflict between PR and SEO, and it's because SEOs used to put loads of links into press releases, and they just were these link fests. And I think that's where initially a lot of the conflict between the teams came from. But really, when I'm optimizing a press release, I'm like, what pages on our site could help inform a journalist more, or a reader? And that's what I reference. I never use anchor text. I always say, for more information, look here, and highlight and link the word here. Or so you've got to kind of go the other way, make it look anti-optimized. but you're just trying to put links in that serve the story. And often, if I'm coming up with a PR story, I'm thinking, okay, how can we give a journalist everything they need on the page? And it informs what we put on the page, thinking what they'll need, as opposed to hunting for pages. But both work. If you want to see some really good examples of campaign or PR campaign pages, I suggest you look at finder.com. I'm super impressed with their PR team. They've got an amazing PR team in Australia, and I know they're building them out globally at the moment. And they make just these pages that they'll do a PR stunt, they'll give the summary of it, they'll give the data, they'll give the methodology, they'll give the images, they'll give the videos, and it's all on one page. It's so cool. It's everything a journalist needs. And so you can, in the press release, just reference the different parts of that page, and you can use smart links to do that. But this does lead me back to the initial question, which was Newswise. So when I used to joke at Distill that I was the only PR in the village because it was just me when we started. We didn't have an outreach team, and there was a lot to be done. And I was like, there has to be a way to scale this. So I looked into Newswise and I tested loads, pretty much everyone I could find. And I ranked them based on what sites do they syndicate to, because that actually wasn't like a tragic thing to be doing at the very beginning of my SEO career. But what sites do they syndicate to? And how relevant are they to the content? You know, is this a motoring press release ending up on a pharmaceuticals site? You know, and I have to admit at this point, I didn't realize, I didn't know that much about XML. So I did this all manually. And just FYI, a lot of these press releases syndicate to 600 sites. It was like a couple of long weekends going through these manually to work out, were they relevant? Were they doing followed or no follow links? Because at the time, if you're working with a gambling site, followed links from a wire was probably helpful because they're so hard to get. But I recently, we did do some press releases to get those low-level links once or twice, but then we decided to go back to normal strategies. But it did show me which press release wires actually give you real coverage, but they cost a lot. So as a point of reference, PR Web has had a lot of bad press for distributing press releases that aren't true. Now, a lot of journalists are personally liable for the accuracy of their own articles, which basically means, let me give you a little thought exercise. Think of the most valuable thing you own: your car, your guitar, your house. If I said to you, cover my content, but risk your car, your guitar, or your house, would you do it? You just wouldn't, right? And PR Web, because of its reputation issues, runs the risk of a journalist doing that. Whereas sites like PR Newswire do fact check their releases. So if I was a journalist, I'd feel a little bit safer about going with PR Newswire over PR Web. I'd probably still check the sources, but journalists are busy. So I think there's a credibility aspect to think about. But if you're doing fast, actual hard-hitting news, I do think they can be super helpful. And I've just started a new research study looking at cheap wires, because a PR Newswire wire can be a couple thousand. And that's fine if you're doing an ICO or if, you know, it's a big launch or something like that. But if it's just a piece of content, for some people, that's half their budget. But there's a couple of newswires I'm looking at right now that distribute primarily business news and finance for about $100. And I have to say the results are fairly promising. I'm going to continue the study over the next sort of 3 to 4 weeks, and then I'll tweet about it. But I'm really encouraged by it because the reality is ringing through to a newsroom news desk is possible in Britain. In America, it's impossible. Almost impossible to get to the news floor where you ring, you're like, hi, and they're like, newsroom, and you're like, hi, my name's Lexi, I've got a story I think you would love and you've got to run today. It's impossible to do that. And then you send an email and it just gets sunk to the bottom or maybe gets caught in a filter. The wires get straight through, and instead of having to build a long newsroom list, you just whack it on the wire and that bit's done, and then you do your direct one-to-one journalist outreach. So I do think there are some efficiencies to be created there through using them. You do have to be careful from an SEO perspective, but I think there's some really promising things on the horizon. And it actually leads me into the subject of AI in publishing. So I sat down with the Associated Press and talked to them about how they're using artificial intelligence to auto-generate articles. Now, I'd like everyone to pause for a moment and just think about how journalists say they don't like to have mass emailed press releases, right? Or they don't want us to mail merge a pitch, but they're auto-generating content. But it feels a little hypocritical. But if you look at the stats, they're making a whole load of money out of this. And a lot of the auto-generated content is generated from press releases sent to the news at New York Times or news at Wall Street Journal address. So if your email to the news at gets caught in a spam filter, you run the risk of not getting in the AI-generated content, which is making up more and more of what they publish. So using a newswire in the future, and even presently, gives you a higher chance of being included in these AI-generated articles. Some people are increasing the amount of business and finance coverage they can put up by about 50% using AI. Do you really want your clients to miss out on that because you didn't get it to the news ad address? Because pitching journalists is one thing, but we're now pitching robots. And it's important to keep that in mind as we go forward. So that's why I've had the reinvigorated passion for wires. I'm going to do some tests. I'll let you know about it. But if anyone else is doing any tests or has had experience with the AI-generated coverage, I'm super interested to hear. Now, I know we're coming close to the end, and I'm looking through the list that Elli and I put together of all the questions, and I think we probably not got through like 3% of them. But Elli, I think it would be really cool if we can talk a little bit about what advice do you give to someone, whether they're a content marketer or a graduate looking to grow their knowledge in PR and PR SEO. Like, what do you wish you had known before you began?
Oh my gosh. I think I wish I had started out with because I started out, as an SEO, building links, buying links, doing like trying to get as many links as I could. I just didn't have the mentality of, I want these to be high quality and valuable, and I want people to use them. It wasn't something you thought about. I wish going back that I had started trying to figure out how to make a link clickable. I wish I had tracked, because I've always erred on the side of non-anchor text specific links. I want supernatural anchor text in everything we do. But in the beginning, it was anchor text specific. And I kind of wish after all these years, after being in this industry for around 8-9 years, that I had done some sort of case study on how to make links clickable. I have information over the last couple of years, and we're actually able to drive referral traffic with links. But I wish I had tracked that over the years and really tried to figure out what makes people click on a link. Because in guest posts, it's very difficult. It's just so random, which one they click on and will they stick around on the page once they get there? I wish I'd looked at time on site from people who had clicked on my links. And then I wish I'd looked at pages per visit. And now I've been tracking it for the past 1.5 years or so, but it would be great to have that data for the last 5-10 years.
Oh, the data that I wish I had kept. I mean, yeah. I've got some hard drives of data. I'm a data hoarder. But yeah, I know that feeling. And I've actually gone back to clients in the past to say, hey, I ran that campaign. Is there any way I can have access to the data? I'm not going to use it in anything other than my own geekiness. And you'd be surprised. If you've done a good job for a client, they'll give you access. And half the time they forget to disable access to their GA and stuff anyway. Yeah. So it can be a nice way to revisit them. I think
one other thing I wish I would have done really briefly is had a better link framework over the course of the years. I used to just be any link, all link, everything is amazing. And only in the past couple of years have I developed a very clear link framework that's okay, we need links to our homepage, we need links to our core pages, we need links to our content, and we need incremental growth in all three of those areas. Before it was super sporadic, so you would see, referral traffic and links going like this. But if I had the mentality of at least one more link month over month over month, that would have been something I would have done and kind of implemented with my team a couple years ago.
That's all great advice. I'm going to come at it from a completely different perspective.
Okay.
I'm going to tell people to read more news. The amount of times I walk into an agency and I say, how many of you have read 2 full articles in a publication this week? And they say, no, nobody has. And I'm like, you're not alone. Read more news. And you don't have to read the whole newspaper. The amount of times I pick up a newspaper and just flick through it and I just read the headlines, you know how much you learn about what's going on in that publication in the world just by reading headlines? We put this pressure on ourselves to read full articles. I know from speaking to journalists who monitor their own traffic and time on site that something like 70% of people don't read past the first paragraph. So don't put that pressure on yourself. I personally try and read a full article every day because I don't want to lose my ability to focus for the length of time of an article and be, the victim of technology and my brain to start shrinking. But other than that, just flick through. And I think there's something about starting a business. If your client has a business, that's their livelihood. If you know what it's like to run a business, your whole strategy with how you think about things changes. So I would encourage people to say, right, here's £100 or $100. Go buy some marshmallows and sell them. Sell them in the office, whatever you have to do. But work out how it feels. At what point how many are you going to give away in order to start selling them? How are you going to get them into the office newsletter that there are marshmallows available? It's amazing what happens when you stop treating people like clients and you start treating it like your own business. Your whole mindset shifts. And I think, when I was a kid, my first business was selling silkworms. Did really well at that. I was the industry leader until a giant ant attack. And then after that, the first one was sherbet, but then some kid had a better, cheaper supplier than me, so I moved on to silkworms. But I was always selling something, and it taught me just so much what it means to someone when you're taking advice, when you're trying to drive actual business change. Because I think the future of PR, the future of SEO, what we are people who drive business growth, right, or business change in some way, shape, or form. And what you really want is your team to understand what it means to have a business, because it makes them better to work for you, but it also makes them better with the clients. There's nothing better than when a client looks you in the eyes and feels that you feel the same burn for their business as they do. And that's not possible if you've never owned a business because you don't have a point of reference. So those would be my 2 main tips. Read some news. Try and read an article. Don't let your brain shrink. And sell silkworms. Have a lovely day, morning, or evening, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to Ellie and I. It was such a pleasure to share some of our knowledge and experiences. We would love to speak to you more. Feel free to tweet us both. And thank you for joining the event.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, ladies.
Of course, anytime.
Cool.
All right. Are we still live?
Yeah, it's always still live, and Steve and I are just too burnt out to make a good transition. I'm sorry.
No problem. Guys, thank you so much for putting on such an awesome event, and I look forward to catching up with you soon. Have one great big nap.
Yeah, I certainly will. I'm sure Steve will too.
All right.
All right.
Soon.
Yep.
Bye.
See you. Bye.